Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, we all travel the roads and go over the bridges. It's time for an update on the improvements, but first let's take a look at the economy and what might make a difference. I'm talking about Pennsylvania's economy. As they say, let's get to it.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Well, welcome back. This Pennsylvania Newsmakers is committed to hearing from all sides on big issues of our times. We had Governor Wolf last week who presented his budget. Joining me now are two of the important state business leaders who are on the program to talk about the economy and get their reaction to a number of the elements in Governor Wolf's budget proposal to the Pennsylvania legislature. Sitting across from me is Gene Barr. He's the president and CEO of the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry. And David Taylor, he's the president and CEO of the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. All right, Dave, let's start with me. Let's just have an overview. The economy in the state, you know, it's not quite as good as it is nationwide, but our unemployment isn't bad. New jobs, in fact, employers, you guys know this, there are job openings and they can't find people with the qualifications, something that we're all wrestling with to deal with it. Go ahead.
That's absolutely right, that the workforce crisis is the number one challenge, and it does speak to something positive. We have historically low unemployment, that there's upward pressure on wages, so wages are rising for people, and that's all healthy and good. The challenge that we face, unfortunately, is that the reason why Pennsylvania doesn't perform as well as the national economy is because of the competitiveness differential from Harrisburg. And sadly, that Governor Wolf put forward a number of exceptionally bad ideas in his budget proposal that have to be resisted if we're going to try to help Pennsylvania to grow.
Weigh in on that. Now, is the problem, we do have an older workforce, you know, and yep. You know, younger folks, when they go to one of our more than 100 colleges and universities in the state, tend to leave. So go ahead.
Unfortunately, we do have some of them leave, and that's far too many. It's one of the reasons, as Dave noted, that the issue that we're grappling with most intently is on the workforce. And Pennsylvania demographically is challenged because we have fewer young people percentage-wise than a lot of other states. Yeah. It's the Chamber's number one priority, as Dave noted, is something that businesses grapple with every day. It's why the governor did put together this workforce command center that brings private sector, government, labor together. We've got to find a way of resolving this. If we can, it'll be a competitive advantage. But we have tremendous challenges, and people say to me, well, which industry has the problem? Every single one. There's not a single employer I talk to who says, I got all the people I need for my applications. It is arguably a crisis, and it's not just Pennsylvania, but we got to figure out a way of solving it.
Well, let's talk about one of the industries around which, let's be honest, there's some controversy. I'm talking about natural gas, the deep fracking that goes on. It's heavy out in the Southwest. Also runs across, the
northern tier.
Yeah, Route 80, and then drops down into the Appalachians. Governor Wolf has generally been a favor of natural gas, though he does I want you to get into what policy proposals he does, and he does have some concerns about the pipelines and the possible environmental impact of those.
Well, I mean, I'll let the governor speak for himself about where he stands on those issues. I mean, from PMA's viewpoint, we look on this energy opportunity as being Pennsylvania's best chance to have prolonged, sustained, broad-based economic growth for Pennsylvania. Manufacturing is the engine that drives our economy. All manufacturers need energy and lots of it. So the idea that we would not make the most of this natural gas opportunity is just deeply wrong-headed. Yes, the governor has not supported an outright ban on the harvesting of the energy. He has put state lands off limits, which is we think wrong-headed and foolish. But there are a lot of things that we need to make the most of this opportunity. We need government to move at the speed of business. DEP, despite having jacked up all the fees, the regulators are not moving at the speed of business. And that, it takes months to get a permit that in a competitor state you'd get in like 2 business days. And again, the ongoing threat by Governor Wolf of having a new additional tax on energy production at a time when You know, the asset is at a very low price. The industry is not profiting all that much. It's punitive, and again, he needs to get off this hobby horse.
All right, we're going to run to a break. When we come back, I want to talk about the so-called severance tax, and obviously we have a number of other important issues to deal with, and we'll be back in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association and Partners for Public Education, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
All right, we're talking about aspects of the Pennsylvania economy with two of the state's most significant business leaders. I'm now going to turn to Gene Barr. Gene, there's been a big debate about the severance tax. We're talking about the amount of cubic feet that's extracted from the from these deep wells. It's called fracking. Governor's proposed it every year he's been in. Take it, legislature, not so much. Go ahead.
Look, this natural gas industry is the one that carried Pennsylvania through the recession. It provided jobs when other states were losing them. We're now the #2 natural gas producer in the United States, behind only Texas, and we sure as heck hope we can catch up to be #1. What's harming us now are things such as, let's put another tax on the industry, which we don't talk about other industries. We don't talk about how do we tax them. We say, how do we attract them? We've now got them to add another tax on top of the impact tax, on top of the 9.99% corporate net income tax, would be counterproductive. On top of that, where some of the opponents are now looking is to block the infrastructure, the pipeline that's needed. We have situations where we have Russian natural gas coming into New England because we can't figure out a way of getting Pennsylvania's resources up there that would benefit all of this country and this Commonwealth. It's ridiculous. We need to build out the infrastructure, and we need to make sure that we can continue to grow this industry.
But the Pennsylvania legislature, let's be honest, we have a liberal governor, I'm using this descriptively, not pejoratively, and a conservative legislature. The legislature has shown, I'll go to you on this, and I have something I want to get back to you. The legislature is not going to pass a severance tax, or am I wrong?
Well, no, they're not. And that's why the governor needs to refocus on a pro-growth, pro-production agenda that Pennsylvania citizens want, including people who work in the industry. The governor, in addition to his wrong-headed severance tax and his opposition to a credit for a new petrochemical manufacturing facility in northeastern Pennsylvania, that the governor has also come out with a new carbon tax on the energy sector called the Greenhouse Gas Initiative. This has inspired unprecedented pushback, and that PMA is helping to lead a group. It's a business labor coalition called the Power PA Jobs Alliance. It's PMA and the PA-AFL-CIO, the Coal Association and the United Mine Workers, the Boilermakers,
business and labor,
working together in opposition to this carbon tax, which will shut down all of our coal-fired natural gas or coal-fired electrical generation, even though these companies are the ones that invested the billions of dollars to upgrade after the Obama administration gave coal energy a good hard shove.
All right, let's go to another issue that's been heavily debated, and that has to do with the, do I got this right, the horse racing industry and their fund and what the governor wants to do with it. What's so controversial about that? He wants to take that fund and turn it over.
Yeah, this was implemented years ago in order to, as I understand it, we haven't done a whole lot in that recently, in order to enhance the purses, to enhance the attractiveness of that industry and those races. The governor's proposed to take, as I recall, about $200 million and utilize that for scholarships into the PASHE system. And of course, the industry is pushing back, saying that they brought benefits to this. So there's a big pushback against the governor's effort to do this. I think it's going to be one of the big fights as we go into the budget. As we were talking, the budget needs to be done by June 30, and every year we come in and talk about whether or not we're going to be here in July or not, and unfortunately for many years we were. I think this is going to be one of the fights.
You'll be back in July, but we might not be talking about the budget.
I don't think, but you never know.
True.
My favorite answer is whoever tells you when the budget's going to be done has no idea.
Has no idea,
Because it's always up in the air. This is going to be one of the big things that's going to be resolved as part of that.
All right, we got a minute or so left. You get to pick one more topic in the budget.
Well, I mean, one of the bad ideas that the governor has used over and over is adding increased complexity to Pennsylvania business tax compliance called mandatory unitary combined reporting, which is an attempt
I have no clue
to export.
what that is.
If you would listen, Terry, I'll explain it. It's an effort to export Pennsylvania tax liability onto companies' operations in other states.
Okay.
And that this is something that is, Pennsylvania has already dealt with this issue with expanding the powers of the Secretary of Revenue with this expense add-back provisions, and so it's deeply unhealthy. If government wants more money out of the private sector, they need to help the economy to grow rather than to continue to turn the screws on the productive sector.
All right, there you go. I listened, right? I listened. All right. We're out of time, but I'm going to go.
That's
is
fine.
there anything in the budget that you like?
Yeah, we talked about that, which is workforce development. The governor, I believe, has put the appropriate focus on making sure we've got the 21st century workforce.
And it will get done by June 30, you think?
What, the workforce development?
No,
it's
the whole
ongoing.
budget.
The whole budget? Yeah, it'll be done by
You
June
agree?
30,
Constitutional
I think
deadline.
It will.
There you go. All right, coming up, roads and bridges. We're going to do an update on the improvements, and we'll get to that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Cross-State Credit Union Association. Credit unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, go to ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties, representing the faculty and coaches who are devoted to providing quality public higher education for Pennsylvania's college students.
All right, we all travel, as I say, on the roads and over the bridges, and road and bridge construction is extremely important. There's been a program in the state underway for several years. Joining me to talk about where all of that stands, so when you take off and we're safe and the roads are in good shape, is Bob Latham. He's the Executive Vice President of the Associated Pennsylvania Constructors. All right, Mr. Latham, let's get into this. There have been a number of accomplishments. Let's talk about that. The number of accomplishments under a state law that was passed several years ago.
People want to know, what is the government doing with your money?
Yeah.
And one of the things that I'm happy to say is I'm part of a program where we have measurable results. And you can see what's happened and what's been accomplished.
Because we drive, right?
Yeah, we drive. But, when we started this, you mentioned the Highway Funding Bill of 2013, known as Act 89. When we started that, we had 6,000 bad bridges in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Number one in the country, 6,000. We've reduced that number to just over 2,500. That's quite an accomplishment. We have much safer bridges. We have much safer roadways. So the statistic that I like the best is that in 2018, Pennsylvania had the lowest number of highway fatalities in the history of that statistic.
Oh my gosh.
So when we fixed bridges, when we fixed interchanges, added some guardrail, signal projects, some minor stuff, but big impact. So less and less people are dying on our highways than before, not in a small reason because of the safety improvements as a result of that highway bill. We've also paved more than 30,000 miles. Pennsylvania has 40,000 miles on its state system. So we've almost paved the entire state system over, and a lot of bridge projects like I mentioned. So we've made some accomplishments with that.
I'll tell you, before we go on, and I know that you also indicate that we're actually losing ground. I want you to get into that. But I used to, before you started coming on this program, my hackles were raised every time I had to wait for 10 or 15 minutes or drive around some construction or over a bridge, that was under repair. And then because of you, I started to think that this is important. it's just important for the health and safety of our residents, right?
Transportation touches everybody, even if you don't,
point.
even if you never leave your house. You have to eat, and the food has to get to you somehow, either by truck or by car.
All right, we're losing ground. Despite all of that you just discussed, we're not. How are we losing ground? Why are we losing ground?
Several things. Okay, so this is a week that we talk about the budgets, right? The federal budget was just rolled out by President Trump. The state budget was just rolled out by Governor Wolf. What is the one thing that is not front and center that touches everybody that was not front and center in either of those budgets?
Is it the I
transportation,
word? Infrastructure,
infrastructure, and transportation. Lip service, I would say, on the federal side, and it's just not there on the state side. There are other priorities that were outlined. The other reason we're backsliding a little bit is because our system of funding transportation is based on fuel consumption, fossil fuel consumption, gasoline, diesel fuel. Well, guess what? More and more people are driving electric vehicles. More and more people are driving fuel-efficient vehicles. And as a result of that, our revenue, which does not have any kind of an index baked into it, is starting to go down.
So the revenue is starting to go down. And you also point out that the need to do this construction is now going up, right?
Well, when we passed the transportation bill in 2013, we focused on projects of a regional and a local community matter, and we did not focus on our interstates because we felt that the interstates are a federal system and something that we were hoping that Congress and the President would deal with going forward, and even at that time was President Obama. And unfortunately, even though that program has not grown at all, the money coming from Washington for our interstates has not grown at all. But at the same time, the government said you have to spend more on it. We'll talk about that a little later.
Yeah, we're going to run to a break. When we come back, let's get into that, and we'll be back in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care.
All right, we're talking about big transportation issues with Bob Latham. He's the Executive VP of the Associated Pennsylvania Constructors. All right, it's just not Pennsylvania alone, but as you talked about at the end of the last segment, there's an interstate aspect to it, and you say there's a dilemma. What's a dilemma?
Well, the dilemma is that the federal government is not really funding that program the way it should. Again, this is a national program. It was created in the 1950s. A lot of us grew up taking it for granted, but it doesn't last forever. It has to be rebuilt, sometimes expanded. Things change in the economy. Let's look at Pennsylvania. We're the Keystone State. Everything on the ground has to come through here, either on rail or on trucks. Yeah. And if you live in central Pennsylvania and you drive our interstates, either 81 or 83, there's one thing you've noticed: you can't see the farmland through the big warehouses anymore, and all that puts more and more traffic on the roads. So as we all buy from Amazon or Walmart online, that's got to come to us by truck.
Here's something that's really fascinating. In the surveys that get done and when people are interviewed, they talk about the importance of doing road repairs, bridge construction. But yet, and lawmakers in both parties talk about doing it, but I guess it's the amount of money that's necessary. We're talking about not hundreds of millions, but billions.
Well,
billions of dollars.
At the end of the day, somebody has to pay. There's no free ride. One of the problems we have in Pennsylvania, quite frankly, is that when we passed the high fuel tax, if you will, in 2013, that a lot of that money, $4 billion with a B, has been taken out of that to prop up the general fund. And why is that?
So hold on, I want to stop here because this is important. So money that was supposed to go to roads and bridges ends up getting siphoned off by the lawmakers to other projects in the state or other aspects of the state budget.
Right, about $700 million per year goes from what they call the motor license fund, which is funded by a gas tax and your registration fees, and it goes to the general fund. It's under the state police budget, but primarily it's a general fund transfer. And that as a result of that, we don't have general fund tax increase. Well, that's great, but now you've got this. The other thing is on public transit, the Turnpike, Pennsylvania Turnpike tolls are basically subsidizing that, and there's a cliff, if you will, that's coming in 2022. So there's going to be a big hole being blown in the general fund here if we want to address it. At the federal level, there's really been not much done to increase funding there, but the Federal Highway Administration or the federal government has come to us and said, you got to spend more on the interstates. So we're now sort of robbing Peter to pay Paul on that side, taking money from local projects, put it on the interstate.
A lot of us drive the Turnpike regularly, and you just talked about the debt. And in some way, it has to be managed, but is that going on? Is that happening?
Well, the law basically says they have to issue debt. The money goes over and then eventually pays for public transit, which is an important thing throughout the Commonwealth. We need to fund public transit systems, and it's not just our big cities, but it's everywhere. Whether ride sharing, paratransit, things like that, in every county of the state. The problem is that it's really hurting. I mean, our turnpike has the highest tolls now because they're propping up the public transit. So we're going to have to find ways through the general fund and the bottom line is, you can't keep looking people in the eye and saying you can have it all for nothing.
I think, it's transportation, as you elaborated, is extremely important to the economy. It's extremely important to health and safety, which you've already commented about. But it seems like it's one of those issues, and we deal with the state legislature and the governor on this kind of activity all the time, that they say it has a priority, but siphoning off money, moving it from one place to another, seems to be more the rule than the exception.
Right. So eventually we're going to have to face the fact that we have to fund our infrastructure and fund our transportation system. And we made a large step in Pennsylvania on that in 2013. We've made a lot of improvements that we talked about at the beginning of the segment here, but we also are starting to lose ground on that. We're having to take money from one part of the highway program, if you will, and put it in another. And anybody that's driven on interstates knows, they have problems, and we need to.
And it's easy to do for the state legislature. I don't mean this meanly, but because they need money in these other places, and so they don't want to raise taxes. So shifting money around seems to be now, an important aspect of the budget.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to look at an overall sort of general fund tax restructuring here to address a number of these things. We still haven't really in earnest addressed the pension system. We're still, we're hearing about property taxes and the problem there, but all of that's going to have to come together.
All right, thanks for the update.
You bet.
All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well.